I'm all ears. How can I best help?
Well, we'll just start by reading our prompt. It's a short one, and we figured we'll just go from there. So, we're a newlywed couple with a 3-month-old baby. We actually just had our first anniversary year last week, and we'd like to get insight on how to define and enforce standards within our lives. We each come from unphilosophical families, each in their own way, and want to make sure that our lives go well and that we protect our son.
Well, congratulations, of course, on the anniversary and the baby. And tell me where the major areas are.
Well, obviously, I think it comes from the family. I stopped talking to my dad back in December after got some allegations from my aunt that he had sexually abused his younger sister. And so I just said, if there's a red line in your life where you don't want to talk to anybody, I'm like, that's too far for me. So I've been dealing with the fallout with that, with my siblings and my mother, and just trying to navigate all that. And then my wife, she's 10 years younger than me, and so she's kind of coming into her own with philosophy and introducing you to her show, and so she's navigating, or we're navigating, her family dynamics as well. Just thinking of her background, she came from like more of a, I guess you would say, fundamentalist Christian background. Like she was homeschooled and all that good stuff, and her mom stayed at home. But just that there was a lot of physical violence and authority based parenting. And during dating, we talked about all the right stuff, and I won her over to peaceful parenting. And like I was circumcised as a baby. We didn't circumcise my baby, so we're planning to raise him peacefully and do the homeschooling thing. So we're just looking to do it better the next round, and I think we're actually in a pretty happy place with our own house out in the country, and we're really just looking to make life better. And I'd heard so many call-ins of people that are calling in with disasters. I'm not trying to be at that point in my life, so I finally took you up on your offer um, and wanted to speak to you for once. So really, it's an honor.
Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. And I'm sorry to hear about all of this stuff with the family. Tell me more about what the allegations are regarding your father.
Well, he is 7 years older than that aunt that he molested. My dad was one of 8 kids, and so my dad was um, fifth in the lineup, and the aunt was eighth in the lineup. And my aunt died back in the early 2000s in her late 30s. And I was told as a kid it was a sleeping pill overdose. But then I grew up and I was told it was a cocaine overdose. And she just, I didn't know too much about her life, but it seemed pretty chaotic. And, it's like from what, from where. And then hearing those allegations from my aunt, it kind of put it into like clarity for me because my dad, he's always been, let me just say an asshole, been pretty angry fellow, and I, he's told me that he's happy, and I was talking with my wife before the call. I'm like, how do you argue with somebody when they tell you that they're happy, but he's sitting drinking beer every day and just kind of scrolling Facebook in retirement? That's not what I want to be doing when I'm retired. And so, he says he's happy. I don't believe he's happy. And my mom, I brought this up to her when I first found out, and she was in denial about it. And this the whole thing just didn't sit with me. I didn't like to have to be the moral voice when my parents are 35 years older than me. And so, sorry, that's pretty broad, but I just wanted to kind of throw you into this overview here.
No, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. So, if I understand this correctly, the allegations are that your father molested his sister when they were children.
Yeah, according to my aunt, who's his older sister, it began when my dad was 12 and continued until his late teens. And then my younger aunt, I think she was about five or so. And my wife actually talked to my aunt about it. And I think that was really courageous of her because my aunt and I had kept up a correspondence over letters for a while. And she kind of alluded to it, but I hadn't wanted to face what the raw details were. She just was saying things like, now that you got a baby, protect your baby. And she's like, when I see a child come into the family, I just feel sadness that they're gonna, something bad's gonna happen again. And nothing happened to me as a kid as regards that. Um, but I do appreciate my aunt for sticking out for us, and my wife for kind of being a moral force to help me along.
Right. Okay. So it went on for 5 or 6 years or so?
Yes, and the strange thing is, according to my aunt, she had like a whole family sit down with everybody, and this was when my other aunt was still alive, and I think this was even before I was born. And um, sorry, I'm trying to get my details straight. She told everybody, and my grandparents just basically wanted to, keep the family name and say we're not going to talk about this, and so kind of threw my aunt under the bus and protected the abuser. And when I explained this to my siblings, they kind of just said like, "Well, you should go talk to your uncles and corroborate this because why would they still hang out with dad if this is true?" And my thinking was like, "Well, trespasses happen all the time, and people are afraid to confront people on that sort of thing. Especially my dad; he's a volatile person, and he'll just argue with you and tell you to get the hell out of here and that sort of thing." So to me, I saw it as very plausible that this could have just, been swept under the rug. And why would my aunt be so emphatic about that? She had even produced a letter from her younger sister saying basically my dad did that, and my sister was just saying, well, that could be fabricated and that sort of thing. So the onus was put on me to do all this investigation, and I thought that's not my burden to bear. Why do I need to go, be your proof and fact checker for you? If you want to go find it out, you can find out too. We've done more work than anybody to I don't know what the right answer to the situation is for me. For me, it's frankly pretty exhausting. So I'm like, I'm not going to talk to my dad. Um, but I hope that helps clarify my position a little bit better.
Well, and the victim is, like, over 20 years dead now, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And is there a general sense or idea, and it's shockingly common, of course, that people who are sexually abused turn to drugs to manage the internal horror of their victimization. Is there the general idea that she turned to drugs because of this?
I don't think my family has that level of knowledge, or I think maybe they do, but let me give my mom as a good example is that she's just pretty much in denial about it. She says my aunt that made the allegations that she's crazy and that oh she smokes weed and she's out of her mind and stuff. So she's just completely just character assassinating my aunt. And the the funny thing is my cousin the son of my deceased aunt, he lives out there near her. And I'm like, why would you have a cordial relationship with somebody that is making up crazy things about the family? So there's that evidence. And then, um, sorry, I'm getting a little off track. It's such a long thing to run you in on, but I think that I think my aunt is credible, and I think that for something buried this long, you're right that I can't go ask my dead aunt what happened. I gotta go off my aunt that's alive that says that this is a problem, and I'm not gonna get the truth from my dad, and I'm not gonna get the truth from my mom. And like I said, I don't want to go out and ask anybody because I don't even know what it's going to prove. Like, it just connects the dots from my childhood about why my dad is like he is, and for me, there's just like kind of a 1 foot in, 1 foot out. Like, I feel a little bit of sympathy for my mom, but also, according to my aunt, she came into it with eyes wide open with this family meeting that she knew my dad was this way. And I think maybe the clock was running out for her and that she wanted to get married, and she just sort of ignored that. And, I'm glad to be alive and all that, but I think she had full choice and responsibility too. And maybe I'm just a little bit susceptible to the female side of things, whereas males, I just see the obvious aggression, and I recoil from that.
Right, right, okay. All right, all right. And what's the story with your mom?
Um, could you be a little bit more specific?
Well, I mean, what's your mom's history or family and her relationship with your dad and so on?
Well, the the neat thing is my family's pretty much from the same town. My dad grew up more up north, but let's say, just to put it succinctly, all my grandparents are buried in the same cemetery here. And my mom was single for a lot of her 20s or in off and on relationships and stuff. And, went to college and moved up north to be near her brother who was in business and all that sort of thing. So my mom, um, she just met my dad at a bar down here at this same old town that they're all tied to, like I say, through their parents, and they got married after 3 months. And my dad had been divorced for I don't know how long. I have a half brother that's 7 years older than me, and I think they split when he was 4. And so anyway, they got married pretty quick, and they've been married ever since. And my mom's story, gee, I guess I would like more about that. I don't think that they, you know, Steph, I've really talked to them about, back probably I'm in my early 30s now. I talked to them a lot in my mid 20s about these sorts of things, and I just kind of lifted the veil from my eyes that they weren't philosophical people, that I wouldn't get the answers that would satisfy me. I would say I've listened to you for about 8 years. Um, I've read Peaceful Parenting and RTR and UPB, Art of the Argument. Really like Steve Franson's work. I've just read a lot of the classics and kind of self-taught a lot of that stuff because I went to public school and that sucked. So I've had a great philosophical journey, and obviously, when you think about applying that to your family, it's never quite satisfying because you think that you're going to go in with, you know, here's what I need for you, and here's what I got for you. But that, like you said before, that their consciences are kind of crusted up at that point by the decisions that they made, especially now coming to light about what happened in the family before I was even born. Like that ship sailed long ago. So I've been living with the clarity of that. I guess it has been interesting to say the least.
Right. Okay. And where do things stand with you and the family as a whole, including the sort of extended family at the moment?
Um, I would say at a it's at a strange, uneasy agreement where I haven't talked to my dad in 6 months, and I see my mom just by the by, where I'll put up my boundary and say, I don't want to see dad. So he hasn't met the baby, and my dad hasn't reached out either at all. And the thinking for me was, I feel more comfortable talking to my mom about these sorts of things because at least she's not volatile and she'll listen. Well, listen in a loose sense, but I so I've kept up that little sort of boundary, and it was just my mom definitely didn't come up to bat with me because you'd think that if somebody had this big conversation with their son, and you'd go to your husband and say, gee, your son's really got this problem with you. I mean, he said all these terrible things. We got to, move heaven and earth to go figure this out for him. And there's just been no call from my dad that, he's not been blocked or anything. I mean, I would be probably shaking in my boots to take a call, but I mean, I think that's a natural reaction to it because it's a heavy thing to say. But I told my sister about it. Like I said, she was kind of just like my mom and sort of in denial. And she recently had a baby within the past month and a half, and I hadn't met that baby yet, not for unwillingness to, but we live a few hours apart. But she's seen my baby a couple times, and with my half brother, when I told him that the baby was born, um, I was just trying to make like a courtesy call, say, hey, call the important people, say, hey, baby's on the earth, he's alive, and he just wanted to say like, you got to get things figured out with dad. And I just said, I don't want to talk about that right now. And I had only talked to him on his child's birthday at one point in the past couple months, and I've always been a little aloof from my siblings because, like I said, I realized long ago that they're not philosophical people, and like I say, it's probably I don't know. I don't know if it's right or wrong. That's why I'm saying about the call to enforce standards. If I should keep this 1 foot in or 1 foot out, obviously you're not going to tell me what to do. But I've just been thinking about what's the right sort of closeness with them because obviously it's pretty distant of just like my kid's alive or your kid's cute, and it's very very casual. But yeah, I don't even know what value you get from a casual relationship if when you dig down into the morals of it, is that they're not wrestling with it the way I am. I really don't think that they're thinking about these issues all that much. It's just doing too much heavy lifting, and that's not fair.
And do you know anything else about your father's childhood?
Well, I know that my dad would say that my grandparents were crazy for having 8 kids, and he didn't say that in an affectionate way. So I do think that his childhood was probably pretty chaotic in a small house with a lot of kids, and, obviously, that is how abuse slips through if people aren't vigilant. Obviously, you can't have a large family without having abuse, but, just for his situation, obviously, my aunt had said that my dad would abuse my aunt out of anger at his parents, and um, I think that's also very telling of the childhood. I really don't know too much about his childhood other than like it was kind of the freewheeling '70s, and he was smoking weed and smoking cigarettes and just kind of having to run of the town and all that sort of thing, and that he was
Sorry,
kind
you
of
mean as
a
a teenager?
yes,
Okay.
and that he was just sort of a brute or the big guy that his younger brothers would look up to because he was just the cool one. And so my dad, he had got married at 19 to my brother's mom, and they were married for 12 years. And according to my aunt, that relationship was also abusive and grounds for divorce. But when I was a kid, all I was told was that my brother's mom was kind of crazy and like the divorce generation, and we all know that a lot of divorces are initiated by women, and so I'm like, well, that makes sense because my grandparents, my dad's parents, they were married for 69 years, so I always looked up to their marriage, and I thought that's really cool. And my grandpa cared through my grandma through dementia, and she never spent any time in a home or anything. So anyway, I thought that my dad was trying to go through that, and then his wife wrecked that idealism for him. And then when he met my mom, it's like he could jump back into it. But according to my aunt, there was more that's going on. But when you're a kid, that's just what you hear. So kind of updating some of my thinking on that. And I always remember as a kid, there was this one picture in my house somewhere. It wasn't on display. I just remember finding it, and it was a picture of my dad with his ex-wife and like my brother and like a couple other family members. I remember that the ex-wife's face was torn out of it, so I assume my dad did that at some point at the divorce. So I'm sure he was very angry about that, and that my dad and I would say my parents in general, I would say, are in conformity with basically the conclusion of that meeting that my aunt had with everybody was that they really try to save face and they'd rather look like good people to seem rather than to be.
Okay. Got it. Got it. I'm so sorry about all of this. It's just wretched. All right. I mean, obviously, I have some thoughts. It's funny, I never want to say like I'm happy to hear more, like it's all good news. But if there's more that you want to share, I'm certainly willing to hear.
I probably will think of more at some point, but I've been talking a lot, and I'm really interested to hear your perspective.
Well, is there anything that your lovely wife would like to add?
I have a lot when it comes to my family, but are you asking, like, in regards to my husband's situation?
Whatever you want to talk about. I don't want to, pretend like you're not here. So I'm sure
Yeah.
equal part of the conversation. So I would love
Right.
to hear from you as well.
Okay. Well, I guess I could tell you a little bit about my childhood. Like, my husband started out. I grew up in a very large family. I'm the sixth out of 11 kids, and my mom was home with us. She homeschooled all of us. My oldest three siblings are from my mom's prior marriage, but they were all raised like my dad raised all of them, and their dad was uh, pretty out of the picture. Um, I'm trying to think about. There's a lot when it comes to my family. It was like the traditional Christian household where it was spare the rod, hate the child, and so I would say that there was a lot of violence in my childhood, but it was masked by a lot of like so-called love. So it was always like I would get hit, and then it was followed up with like, I did this because I love you, and you can't be angry at me and stop crying. And um just that general idea, and that's definitely shown itself a lot in me as an adult. And I still have younger siblings who are at home. I have 4 younger sisters who live at home still, and, yeah, just watching their childhood play out is pretty heartbreaking.
Right, right. How did you guys meet?
Oh, well, we met through my cousin. So my cousin worked with my husband for a while, and then there was a gap of time where they didn't work together, and he introduced us.
Okay. And it's fascinating to me, of course, I mean, that you're such outliers in the family situation. I mean,
Mhm.
how do you think you ended up where you are based on where you were?
I would say for myself, I've always been a very sensitive person. So as a child, I did feel that when I was hit, it was wrong, and there was a lot of yelling in my household. I always felt that it was wrong, and I wouldn't say that I have always been against it. Obviously, like when I first met my husband, the first month I would say that we were together, we just argued a lot over things like peaceful parenting, and I was very much under the impression that my parents did everything right and they did everything they could, and it's their first time living, and I just defended them a lot. Um, so I don't fully know, but I would say that my husband was a really wonderful resource for me, and I started listening to one of your Collins shows recently, and those have been a good resource as well. But I don't know. I just think that I've never been inclined towards violence, and so a lot of my family is, whether it's outright hitting or just other habits, are very violent, and so it's always felt a little off for me.
Yeah, I've often thought that morality is just a form of memory. I mean, if
Mm.
you remember how unpleasant and horrible it is to be hit as a child, well, you're just not going to do that to your own kids. And if you kind of forget about it, or I don't know what happens with people, I would like to forget things sometimes, but I just can't. My brain's sort of like a steel trap or a bear trap. It just hangs on to memories. And so I remember very vividly the negative effects of abuse and neglect in my childhood. So, of course, like, why would I ever want to do that to someone else? But it seems like that's a minority position in the world as a whole. People go through horrible stuff, and then it seems like they just can't wait to reinflict it on others. And I think that
Oh,
has to do with a failure of memory somehow. I'm not really quite sure, but it sounds like you guys both really remember the negative effects of your childhoods, and because you remember it and you are decent people, good people, you don't want to inflict that on others. But sorry, that's just a little little side quest there.
yeah.
And I think it has to do with memory, and I think empathy and memory are sort of tied in. And one of the things that trauma does to people, of course, is it ends up with people not being able to retain memories. And when you have trauma and you don't retain the memories, but only the trauma, I think it becomes much easier to inflict it on others. But okay, and what's the status of your guys' relationships with your families of origin at the moment?
Well, I still speak with and see my family on a very regular basis. Um, I am very, very close with a couple of my sisters, and so I talk to them almost constantly. It's daily. And I would say I speak to my mom daily, my dad probably like once a week or so. And yeah, we visit them, I would say like once or twice a month, typically twice a month.
And in terms of regular contact?
Yeah, we see them about once or twice a month. They're a few hours from us, so we'll go up and check up there. And for me, it's been a challenge because her family is dysfunctional in a way that's a lot different from mine. Like for me, I saw what I would call neglect, and then with her family, it was like involvement but angry. And so, like I don't have the same horror at it in a way, but I know that it's wrong too. And like you've said before that neglect is often worse than beatings in a way, just because like at least you're getting some attention. So like I see my wife's family, I'm like, okay, cool. They homeschool and the wife stayed home and the dad has a business. And so, and even if they have the veneer of morality with Christianity, I'm like, at least there's more conversation and um, the potential to repair relationships. And I know my wife has been sort of building a coalition with some of her other siblings, and she's got a lot to build a coalition from to I guess, confront her parents and try to raise the standards with them. And so we haven't been devoid of criticism to them, but obviously we have our thoughts on how they take criticism, or gaming it out in your mind of what would they say and that sort of thing. So, like I say, it's an interesting thing to navigate when my in-laws are different from my family of origin.
And what do your wife's in-laws think of your own family? And what do they know of this sordid history?
I've let them know that I'm not talking to them anymore, or talking to my dad anymore, and that things are pretty cool with my other immediate family, and they're supportive of that. But I also think that it doesn't as closely involve them. I think that if they were in that situation, they might feel that it was unjust. So I think the distance from the situation also, it's not from like a purely moral stance. I think it's more from a pragmatic thing, that like, glad that's not them, because they've had their own um trespasses, and that um they haven't dealt with them, I think, in a real leadership way. And like I say, that if people want the authority of being elders and the respect that comes from, I think that they need to also take the responsibility for that. And lately in the family, they've been navigating some very heavy moral challenges, and my wife and I just reflect that we don't think that it's being handled in the A plus option of the way. And would you like to explain that
Yeah, I'm not
to
sure
your
what's
wife?
meant by the moral challenges, but if you can let
Yeah.
me know.
Um, yeah, for sure. So there's a which is awesome. There's a couple big things. Um, the first one being that when, like a few years ago, my younger brother sexually abused my nephew. And they were both children, but it was a big age gap in children. Like, I think my brother was like 14 and my nephew was like 3. And it was a couple of times that it had happened before it came out. And my brother, my nephew's dad, he got very upset, obviously, as anyone would, and just entirely, like, he attempted to talk to my parents about it. My parents were not understanding of it. They were trying to use the excuse of like, "Oh, he was a kid. How could he have known?" And they claimed that they agree that it was bad, but at the same time, they backed my brother up wholeheartedly. And my brother ended up taking it, and he made it like got the I don't know. He made it legal. Like, he got the police involved, and my brother had like mandated therapy that he had to go to, and there were like he was put on like the child version of like a sex offenders list. And everything. So my brother still he my parents reach out to my older brother a couple of times. They've tried to talk to him, and he will not have anything to do with my family anymore. And so that was the first big thing. But instead of it being something that we just like handled as a family and move forward with and tried to figure out how to handle it, my parents still to this day, they defend my brother. They say like what he did was bad, but he was a kid. Um, and they kind of in their own way like don't really like they kind of talk crap about my older brother. They don't really agree fully with what he's done, and they claim that they do, but then they still go back and be like, "Well, I wouldn't have done it that way." And they think that he should not have gotten the police involved. They feel very adamantly about that. And then after it all came out, it was this big family secret, and they like my younger sisters didn't find out about this until a few weeks ago, and this would happen years and years ago, and so that was, like, the first big family tragedy. And, I was really upset at my parents for the way they handled it, because I told them that I wholeheartedly supported my older brother. I think that he should have taken like, it was his responsibility to protect his son. Unfortunately, he didn't do that, so now he's doing what he can to protect his son going forward and his family, because he has 4 children. And so he my parents they don't really agree with the way my brother handled it. And so I got into a few arguments with my parents because I told them it was wrong that they didn't tell my younger sisters that there was this whole thing, and that I was being forced to keep this secret for somebody that I think did wrong. So I don't know. There's another big situation, but I don't know if you want me to get into that just yet.
And is that the major issue? I thought there were moral issues more than one. Was that the major issue, or is that the central one?
There are two that are like I would say pretty equally terrible. Um, so it's not funny, sorry. But the first one, that was the first one, and the second one was that my oldest sister uh got married to this guy a few years ago, and my parents just like wholeheartedly loved this dude, like fully dove into it, and he was like he he was just at my parents' house every single day, constantly around them. And, my sister and him, they dated for a couple years before they got married, and he had a lot of pretty obvious issues, I think. My parents were willing to look past those, like, he was in his early 30s, and this was his 3rd marriage already. He had a daughter to, a previous marriage, and somehow, coincidentally, both of the marriages, it was the wife was crazy, and it was not him, it wasn't his fault. He also had some very bad financial financial problem. Like, he just would get into tons of debt and didn't know how to pay it back, and, like, he's at the time of this main incident, which well, okay, so what happened was, my parents loved this guy. He had a lot of issues. My husband and I criticized him because we're like, "We don't really like these issues," but it was more like, he's kind of annoying, and he sounds like not a great guy, but whatever, it's turning out okay, so we didn't bring it up my, um to my brother-in-law or my sister. We just left it, like, "Okay, whatever, live your guys' lives." Um, and they then it came out, beginning of this year that my parents found a hidden camera in their bathroom that was pointed at the shower, which was the main bathroom that all of my little sisters used. And
Oh my God.
I know, it was heartbreaking. Um, and I have 4 little sisters, like, ranging in ages, but, like, they were all minors, and, it came out, it was very, very obvious what had happened, and he had set this camera up, and within, a matter of days, well, the same night that they found it, my parents, had called the police, got the police involved, and within about a week of that happening, he was arrested, and he's still in jail. We're waiting for everything to come through, but, uh
Sorry, he's being held prior to trial?
yeah, there's a lot of stuff going back and forth. He's trying to get, like, an attorney because he won't plead guilty for it. He claims that he put the camera up to protect his daughter from his previous marriage, because she would occasionally stay at my parents' house, and he wanted to make sure no one was sexually abusing her, and he used the past experiences with my younger brother abusing my nephew. He used that as his backing to be like, "Well, there's sexual abuse in the family, and I wanna keep my daughter safe," but it wasn't pointed at the toilet, it was pointed at the shower, and his daughter hadn't been there for a week and wasn't going to be there for another week in the future, so it was just odd
Well,
timing
and
on this.
this is something that even if you were to take such an extreme measure, which I don't know if that's wise or not, probably not, but you would not be able to do that without the permission of your parents, right?
Absolutely, yeah, and that was something that was brought up to him, and they had mentioned it, and, um, he just was like, "Oh, I didn't wanna worry them, and I didn't wanna worry my wife because my sister had no clue about this, and she was beyond heartbroken, and she was just, because she has a little infant as well, and so to this man, and so she was just beyond heartbroken, and she's moved back in with my parents, and she's got the divorce, and she's, um, just doing all the things now. But our main there's a lot of issues in that situation, but our main issue with it, is that my husband and I feel that it was, very the way they handled it after it happened, my parents, they did right, they got the police involved, they did everything they were supposed to. My sisters are all in therapy now, but my parents are responsible for allowing this man into their house, and they don't view it that way. They view it as we were all tricked, and how could we have known? And like I said, they are religious. So my mom keeps going back to this is a spiritual attack on our family, and the devil is trying to get into the family unit. And I believe they have very mildly apologized to my sisters to be like, sorry this happened. But it wasn't like, sorry we allowed this man into your lives. It was like, sorry this happened. How could we have known? This was a crazy situation. We were all tricked. And so I'm just very upset because they've taken no accountability for it. And there were a lot of red flags in the past before this came up. The ones that I had mentioned with his his questionable history, and I just feel as though they definitely should have taken more thought, like, I don't know, had more thought towards letting this man into their house. And there were a lot of really obvious behaviors that he had that were very questionable. Like, he would show up to my parents' house unannounced and hang out with my siblings. I was out of the house for almost the entire relationship. I was in college and then I got married. But when I did visit, he would show up unannounced and like hang out with my little sisters. There's a time he took all my little sisters to the mall with nobody else. Like, he was in his 30s and my sisters were like 11, 10, like they were little. And just yeah, I don't know, like my parents didn't have a problem with it, and they're like, he's a good family friend, he's a good quality guy. And they just handled it like extremely poorly, and they didn't see any of the red flags, I don't think, or they didn't want to.
Well, that's all horrifying. I'm so sorry. And of course, I assume that the police are going to seize all of his electronics, and hopefully these images didn't end up on the dark web or something like that. But yeah, that's just beyond appalling. I'm so sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, they since this had happened a few months ago, they were able to seize all of his electronics, and it seems like it was like a standalone incident. And it looks like it that nothing. We don't know for sure, obviously, but it, as far as I can tell, the police don't think that the images were distributed anywhere. But it's still being treated as obviously like videotaping minors, and there's a lot of charges he has. I don't foresee him getting out and not until he's an old man. So it's been handled well,
Good,
which is good.
good. I think that's just right. I think some people just have such bad wiring, they just can't be in society.
Right. Exactly. I agree with you.
Okay. My God.
It's a lot.
How are the other marriages? I'm I'm getting myself into a crash position here. Fetal position, sucking my thumb. How are the other marriages with your other siblings going?
Not good for the majority. My oldest brother, he was the one who his child was not abused. He was just spectating, and he he wants nothing to do with our family. He won't speak to our family anymore because he just views them as very dysfunctional, which I agree with. He lives hours and hours away, so I haven't seen him in a few years, and he doesn't want any contact with us. So their marriage is fine. So the marriage itself is fine. I shouldn't say it's bad, but they, I don't know what they're up to. They're entirely removed. Um, my my brother, who was the father of the boy who got molested, their marriage, as far as I can tell, is good. It is good. I I don't speak to my brother very often. There's not a specific reason for it. He's very, very busy, and I'm very close to his wife, and so I see her and the children often. Um, so I would say, from the knowledge I have, their marriage is good, but I know that they've had like experiences in the past with my brother abusing alcohol, and he was a firefighter, EMT, police officer. He did all the things, and so he lived a very high stress life and went to alcohol. But I do believe that that's being handled. Um, Another of my older brothers, he is married. His marriage, I do think, is doing well. Um, I spoke with him for hours the other day. I called him, and he seems to be doing pretty well. He has a lot of issues with the way my parents are doing things, but unfortunately, he lives walking distance from my parents' house. He actually rents his house from my dad. So he's very, very intertwined in it, but his marriage seems to be fine. And then my older sister, her marriage, she is just a train wreck of a person. She she moved out as soon as she turned 18 and just entirely rebelled and did all the things. Like, she was a stripper and did drugs and lived in like a drug house and got pregnant from her abusive boyfriend, who she left him. And then she's married to a totally different guy, and he seems to be fine. They're fine. Like, he's not like crazy, but there's just no morals there. Like, they both hit the daughter, the baby that came from the abusive boyfriend. They both hit her, and she's tiny. She's 2, and yeah. So there's no morals there. They're not very good people. So yeah, I don't know. My family is a bit of a train wreck. So there's just not much good to come out of that.
Right. Okay. And where do you guys stand with regards to religion?
We are both Christians.
Well, I would say my religious journey is pretty interesting. Hi, Steph. I've been monitoring the baby and stuff, but I was around. Um, I
You
grew
know
up,
these stories anyway, so that's fine.
Yeah.
yeah, I grew up Methodist, and I was pretty deeply involved with church, just like with youth group and stuff. And earlier you were talking about like how do you think you became to how you are? And you could say some of it's maybe just nature. I mean, I have some friends that are also of a similar bend to me, and we ask ourselves that it's like how are we like we are, and everybody else is like how they are. It's like I don't know, but if you really think about it, maybe there's a little bit of nature there. But I was. I was a Eagle Scout. I went through Boy Scouts as from Cub Scouts, and I was always athletic and did cross country and track and lifting. And I was like I was always a straight A student in public school, and so I guess I took that stuff pretty seriously. Like to do my best, to do my duty to God and my country. To help other people at all times, keep myself physically strong, mentally awake, and morally straight. I took that to heart, and so my parents weren't really raising me. You ask people, what are the great moral advice that your parents have given you? And I even asked my mom that one time after I've been listening to you, and she's like, "The Ten Commandments." She said it in such like a weak way of like, "What do I want to take away from you?" It's like, okay, Ten Commandments, got it. So thou shalt not bear false witness, right? But anyway, so I was raised a Christian, and I kind of fell away from that um, during my later teens and early 20s. Then I started getting back into that and really attended church seriously for a few years, and I liked the community of it and all that sort of stuff. So I was taking it seriously again. But then lately, I guess I've been feeling more of the skeptical side of things, where I've really been thinking a lot about you know, maybe what you'd call like the arguments for atheism or whatever. Not to like it's just been interesting with my wife's family, because I kind of have to wrestle with a lot of arguments that say, well, the Bible says this, but I'm like, yeah, but the Bible's not objective morality. The Bible, you could make 1,000 different interpretations out of it. So I do have a bone to pick with that. I mean, I'm probably like you, where I'm respectful of a lot of Christianity done right. I do know some good Christians, especially one that's a very pro peaceful parenting and all that. I just can't always square that circle. So I'd say right now in my Christian journey, I'm a little bit estranged, but in a strange way, I think that actually asking the hard questions, it's going to make your faith stronger if you do come out of it on the other side with faith. So I don't think a whole lot about like faith and spirituality these days. I'm just trying to stick to I guess you'd say the rational side of things.
Yeah, it's a tough question, of course, and really, really important question because I'm sure that the family members on both sides are praying to God and give me guidance and give me wisdom and give me all of these wonderful, helpful things. And Lord above, help me protect my children and give me the way, the truth. And then when terrible things happen after you have prayed to Almighty and all-knowing God for guidance, when terrible things happen for which you've had no guidance, right? I'm thinking about this horrible, creepy husband who put the cameras in. He's in the house, and the people in the house are all praying for wisdom and guidance, and getting on their knees and consulting their conscience, and there's no hint of any of this, right? They love him, they think he's great. God doesn't sit there and say, "Ooh, this guy's here's someone you have to watch out for." I mean, even my dreams used to do that when I had sort of more corrupt people in my life. I would have bad dreams about them if I wasn't aware of their corruption in sort of a conscious way. I would have dreams about them. And it's really confusing. So, God above, give me guidance. And you've got some, alleged predator in the house, and you're not getting any feedback, any wisdom, any guidance, any warning. And that's really confusing for people. And I think, I don't know how they process it as religious folk. I mean, maybe you guys have some insight. I don't know how they process it, because if you're praying and you believe yourself to be a good Christian, you're praying to an all-knowing, all-wise, all-good God who will give you feedback and give you guidance. how is it that people get regularly blindsided when they are? It's like having an infinite number of cameras around your house, and then continually people keep breaking in that don't show up at the cameras. It's like, how is this possible?
Well, what's interesting for me is my mom was a Sunday school teacher for however many years, and she wasn't like a big, fundamentalist like my wife's family was. She just kind of like, I think she was more like a cultural Christian. She kind of did it out of the tradition of it. So she was always instrumental in making us involved with church. But my dad, for example, he was raised Catholic, and like a lot of the siblings, he went to Catholic school and stuff, and he became like very rabidly anti-religion. And kind of he'd give like, when I'd get into it in my 20s with him, he would say like kind of like the fedora arguments where he'd like, oh, the religion's the cause of problems in the world, if we just didn't have any religion and that sort of thing. I'm like, okay. But I think it's interesting because obviously excuse me, drop something, but that I'd never be able to get to the source of his morality, right? Because I don't, well, if he's thought about it, the conscience has long, closed the trap on that and made it a hell for him. I don't know. But the thing is, um, the way that religion plays in my wife's family, I think that that's something you could at least tie them down to. It's like, okay, you guys believe this. Here's what you believe, and you're failing to that. And it's just kind of like they kind of would shrug at that if you were to game the conversation out in your mind. Like, so if this is supposed to be something affecting your eternity, you don't really act like that. I was listening to one of your call-ins lately, or maybe it was just a monologue of yours where you were kind of making that same argument, and it's so true. It's like if this stuff has eternal significance to your lives, then why are you not acting like that? So then, it goes back to another one of your points where it's like morality is just a cloak a lot of the times, and you just say it to feel good, and then now I can hit my kid, now I can do whatever I want, not because of morality, but just hey, it's fair game, but they haven't really thought it up.
Right, right. Okay, well, I'm sorry for all of this family stuff. Of course, I always want to make sure that I'm explicit and clear about that. It's wretched, it's terrible, it's horrible. So, in the time that we have, what's the best value you can get out of this conversation?
Well, I think it would go back to our original point of where obviously you can't tell us what to do, but I just feel like, you say that your listeners are in the top 1% of intelligence, and I do agree with that. And I want to see what a top 1% of intelligence life looks like. I want to put it into action. I've got my wife, and I've got my house, and I do a lot of home improvement projects. I'm just trying to build a really nice life, and I guess I feel strong and safe enough in my life that I can just keep building, and I don't want to like be dragged down by historical relationships, and I don't always know what that looks like with my dad, for example. It was clear. I'm like I said earlier, you got to have a line somewhere. I mean, if you're not going to draw the line at this abuse, then what are you going to do to it? And then so that's where I'd run into conflict with my wife's family. I'm like, this is something you really got to hold your nose at, and maybe it's like a little bit more hopeful, but it's like every time that it's not acted on, it's like, when is it going to be acted on? So I guess I would like some of your thoughts or arguments on where the standards, um, where they go into play. And sorry, I'm trying to really make this precise for you. So I guess you'd have like a ring around your life, and so like with my wife and baby, that's like the inner part of my fortress. And then like your coworkers are pretty far out there. I'm not as concerned about the morality. I want to work with good people. But then like as personal relationships increase and get to that level of intimacy, there's going to be different, I guess you'd say, duties and obligations and standards to all that. So, if that wasn't clear to you, you could feel free to ask more. But that's what I was getting at.
Got it. Okay. Okay. It's a tough call, and let me know whether I know this sounds like a bit out of nowhere. Let me know if you've ever seen the television show The Sopranos.
No, I haven't seen it, but I'm familiar with it, the general plot.
Have you seen like mob movies? I'm sure you have, like Carlito's Way or The Godfather or Goodfellas, that kind of stuff.
Yep.
Well, from the standpoint of peaceful parenting, you come from crime families. You come from a family of thugs and child beaters and immoral people from the standpoint of peaceful parenting. I get that, of course, morality evolves, right? I mean, back in the 14th century, if you said, I want to start a company that buys and sells slaves, people would be like, oh, well, that's an interesting opportunity, and so on. Or in the ancient world, if you had a company that bought and sold slaves, it would be considered okay. It would be like buying and selling pets at the moment. It would be like, okay, right? Now, of course, if someone in the modern world, maybe not all over the world, but somebody in the modern world says, I want to start a company to buy and sell people, then everybody would be kind of outraged and say, well, try going to an investor, right? I mean, it would be appalling, and people would ostracize you, and it's clearly wrong. So we're kind of in a transition at the moment from slavery to anti-slavery. And it's like walking over a seesaw, like you start and then you walk over the balance part in the middle, and then you go down the other side and so on. So we're kind of in a transition at the moment between child abuse and child protection, in the same way that it was, maybe 100 or 200 years that slavery and serfdom went from fine to terrible. And it's kind of a tough situation. If you come from a family of slave owners and you're going through the process of slavery being recognized as the evil that it is, it's, what do you compare people to? Do you compare them to universal, absolute moral ideals? Or do you compare them to the social standards they grew up in and the social standards they accept and the social standards approved of by their community and accepted by all their friends? I mean, does that make sense? This is sort of a tough call.
Yeah. Yeah, I absolutely agree that we're charting a new course. And when you're explaining things to people and not trying to take the consequentialist position, I mean, like people could find good reasons for hitting their kids, but I'm like, when you just stick with UPB, it's wrong. Like you say, you could find good arguments for slavery, but when you're trying to stick to the morality of it, it does seem like you're just speaking gibberish to a lot of people because they're used to thinking consequentially or socially. And yeah, I totally agree with your analogy.
And so my approach to this, and obviously when I say my approach, I don't mean the right approach, like there's only one and it's my way, but my approach to this has been to reason with people. So when it comes to talking to people about circumcision, and congratulations, of course, for not circumcising your son. Good for you. That's fantastic. Very, very not Aztec of you. So when it comes to something like circumcision, I would say, well, it is male genital mutilation, and you don't like female genital mutilation. There's no medical necessity for it. It removes, a third of the most sensitive skin that the boy has. It's done without anesthetic, and children are still traumatized by it 6 months later. And if the child wants to do that to his own body when he's an adult, then I suppose that's a choice. I don't think it's a wise one, but you do not have the right to make that decision for your son. So I would reason with them. Now, if it's just like, well, kids get circumcised and that's just what you do, and I want him to look like his dad or whatever it is, right? Then they're just kind of on autopilot. So the way that I'd approach these things is to make rational arguments, evidence and facts and so on, right? And what that does is it creates a choice for people. So it's hard to blame people when they don't have a choice. I mean, it's kind of impossible, right? If you go to someone who was raised on some remote desert island, no contact with people, and you say, hey, man, why didn't you learn Japanese? It's like, well, I've never really been exposed to Japanese. I just speak the language, the local grunt language or whatever it is. So for me, I don't judge people until they've heard better arguments. Now, if they've avoided better arguments, that's a different matter, but that's a little harder to track. So I view people as in a state of nature. They are unreasoning and not morally responsible because they've only ever heard the same kind of thing. The internet, of course, has dissolved that to some degree, to a large degree, because people can have instant and easy access to better information now. Like they're literally carrying around things that correct propaganda with them 24/7, and it's a touch away. Before, to find out the truth about Joseph McCarthy, you had to go read a whole bunch of books that were sometimes hard to get a hold of, and so on. Now you can just put the references to people right away. So I view people as not particularly morally responsible, with a couple of caveats. Now, with child abuse, if they're never abusive in public, that's a different matter, right? Then they can't claim that it's universally good parenting to hit your children. Because if it's universally good parenting to hit your children, then you would hit them in public. And that would be fine, right? But they don't, right? Like I consider it pretty good parenting to chat with and play with your children. So it's not like I don't chat and play with my daughter in public when she was younger, right? It's totally fine. So if they don't do it in public, that's one thing. If they don't do it when other people are over at the home, right? In other words, if somebody says, well, I'm so angry, and then the doorbell rings and they're able to control their anger and be really nice, then they can't claim that they were irrational or angry, or, you made me so angry that I did this, because they have complete control over their temper. So what I do is I just provide counterexamples, counter-arguments, and so on. And now they have a choice. So somebody who grew up with slavery is fine. It's a cultural and moral reference and so on. And then when they get exposed to the arguments against slavery, well, now they're responsible. Now they have to make a choice. Now they've been exposed to counter information, to different information. And this, of course, is exactly what parents do with children, right? So with children, what you say is, don't leave the door open because the dog might get out, or something like that, right? And so you're giving children new information and new rules and new responsibilities, which they didn't understand before. In the past, when the kids were little, they'd just run out the door. They wouldn't think about turning around and closing it. So as a parent, you give the child new information. Please, you have to close the door so the dog doesn't get out, or whatever reason, or bugs don't get in, or dust, or whatever, right? So now you've given your children new information, and as a parent, you expect your children to act on that new information, to say, keep the door closed. And so as parents, if you say to your kids, well, you have to act on this new information and you'll be punished if you don't, then when you, as a kid or an adult kid, you say to your parents, here's some new information, I expect you to act upon it. They can't say, well, we didn't know better, or, we can't change, or we can't adapt. Because if you expect a 4 or 5-year-old to adapt and close the front door every time they go out, it's perfectly reasonable to expect somebody in their 40s, 50s, and 60s to adapt to new information. Because if a 4-year-old can do it, a 50-year-old can do it for sure, right? So, sort of long story short, I view people as in a relative state of nature, with some caveats around public-private behavior and behavior when people come over and so on. And then when I provide them better information, provide them arguments, then their moral responsibility accrues. Moral responsibility accrues with better information and better arguments. And we've all had this, I think, over the course of our lives, where I'm sort of neutral about something or don't really think about it, and then I come across a really compelling argument, and it's like, ooh, well, okay, that's changed my mind. That is the perspective I hadn't heard of. That really makes sense, and so on. Or if I have an argument that I disagree with, then I have to formulate counter arguments and find a way to overturn the reason and evidence. So when your parents were younger, when you were little kids and so on, it's kind of possible to say they didn't know better. Now, again, it's tough with parenting, though, because there are so many books available online for free, in the library for free. Just go read a couple of books, and it's really not that complicated to figure out the latest and best parenting tips and tricks and so on, right? So they're still kind of responsible, but they're a little bit less responsible because they haven't had the counter arguments. And again, they're somewhat responsible for avoiding the counter arguments, but that's hard to prove. Nobody ever, because they can just lie. Nobody ever talked to me about it. I parent the way I was parented. That's all that makes sense. And there was never a counterexample. And the good Lord says this, and, spare the rod, spoil the child, as you said. Spare the rod, hate the child, I think, which is even stronger. So they can say these things, and you can't disprove them because who knows what influences objectively had an effect on your parents when they were growing up, or young people or young parents. There's no way to verify any of it. So we can give them, at least for me, I give them some slack. But once I give them the arguments, then they're fully responsible. I have created moral responsibility by providing compelling counter-arguments. And then they are fully responsible. And so in a sense, you create the criminality by passing the law. And this happens, right? I mean, if the tax rate goes from 20 to 25%, then in the past, anyone who paid 20% was fine. In the future, anyone who pays 20% is not paying their taxes in full. And so you create the crime by creating the law. And in the same way, you create being a good doctor by coming up with some new treatment. Let's say when insulin was invented or discovered or applied to diabetes, then beforehand, if you didn't treat diabetes with insulin, I mean, you weren't a bad doctor because it wasn't really known as a treatment. It wasn't available as a treatment. Once insulin is available as a treatment, then you create better doctoring by creating better solutions. You create criminality by creating new laws. And so it's legal to trade slaves until it's not, and then it's illegal and you're a criminal. You're not a criminal, then you're a criminal because the law is established or changed. And so the moral law is a little different because avoiding the universal moral law always involves hypocrisy. Like if you as a kid were ever struck for being distracted or not paying attention or yelled at or something like that, then if your parents are on their phone, you're trying to tell them a story, they appear distracted and inattentive. Are you allowed to yell at them or hit them? No, right? So all of avoidance of the universal rules or consistent rules involves a kind of hypocrisy. So with regards to your parents, sorry for the long speech, but with regards to your parents, I would say that once you have had the discussions with them, you've had the debates with them, maybe you've had the arguments with them, once that has all occurred, they are in possession of the moral law. They understand and are aware of the moral law, and they have not been able to evade or avoid the moral law. They've not been able to out-argue the moral law. Well, then they're morally responsible. If they continue in that path, then while we could say it was kind of murky before, now that they have really committed to not following the moral law and to opposing good arguments based on reason and evidence and morality, well, now they're criminals. Now, if somebody didn't know the tax rate they were supposed to pay, we could say, well, you could have found out, or maybe you'd get a little bit of a break from the tax authorities if you genuinely didn't know what tax you were supposed to pay or something like that, right? And then you could say, well, it's kind of murky and we're not sure. But once you get a clear letter saying, here's the tax you have to pay, and then you don't pay it, well, then that's a different matter, right? Now you're openly in defiance of the law. And I'm sorry to use, as an anarcho-capitalist, to use taxation as an example is a little flaky, but it's one of these things that does tend to change continuously. So once you've had the arguments or the debates, or you've given them the information, and they have continued to resist against reason and evidence, then they now know the law and are choosing to break it, which makes them criminals. And that is a different moral matter from when you were growing up. Sorry for the general speech, but I hope that helps.
Yeah, I really appreciated the perspective where you say that that you create responsibility on people, and I think that's really a wonderful way to look at it for myself as a moral agent. I mean, like my friends, for example, I think that I really brought peaceful parenting to them and pronatalism, anti-circumcision and that sort of stuff, where it just didn't exist. And so now my friends that have boys and they're not circumcised, like you say, you created that. I mean, little tip to yourself, I think. Um, that's a wonderful thing. And a couple months ago, I read Nathaniel Branden's Psychology of Self-Esteem, and that was really influential for me. And I've been smoking on it for a while now. That like the thought leads to the value, leads to the emotion, or like pretty much anywhere on the chain, you could derive one from the other. And like if you have somebody's value, like you think about what emotions that might elicit, or like what thoughts that's born from. And so everybody around you at all times is signaling to you what their state is. And so I've been thinking a lot about what's going to cause me to have the highest self-esteem, and where do I want my values to sit, that's that's going to live in universality, and where is it in relation to other people that don't have that same level of clarity, that they're just, kind of boats tossed around with their emotions, and they don't understand that it's related back to a value, that it's diagnosable, that it's out there. And so what are they creating for that? And so like thinking about my in-laws, for example, um, it sounded like, my wife said that they were more dynamic, but like angry in the past. And now they're kind of like, uh, they'll just sit on their phones and have a beer in the evening. So to me, it's just like, okay, they're sad. And so there's something that you've done in your value system that's caused you to be sad, but it's like you don't have a way to like expiate that. And like I guess Christianity would offer you that, and to say like, okay, you're redeemed from your sins and stuff. I don't find that to be terribly satisfying the way they do it, because they talk about forgiveness of like, I'm just so tired of the argument where it's like forgive so it doesn't burden your heart and that sort of thing, and blah blah blah. But I think that they're having a very clear signal of what their emotional state is, or people with their thoughts and their values. And then if you were to bring that to them, then, like I can hear my inner parents enough say like, oh, try to give excuses for people. But like my universal side of me, I think is strong enough, and it's getting stronger, that I know I'm like you say, you laid out the argument for them. You can't hold their hand for it so much. It's like you led them to water. If they want to drink it or not, that's on them.
Well, or another analogy might be, I remember when I was a teenager, I was heading to work at the mall, and there was a couple of pretty sketchy guys with a rusty van saying, hey, you want to buy some stereos? Or you want to buy a stereo from us? And, you could argue and say, well, they're just entrepreneurial, and they're just starting out, and I'm sure they've legitimately acquired these stereos, and I'm sure if I buy it, it'll be fine. And they're like, hey, man, cash only, no receipt, that kind of stuff, right? And so let's say I bought the stereo, and I was like, yeah, I think it was legit. It seems legit, whatever, right? I didn't steal it myself, and these, whatever. You could make up some story because it's somewhat ambiguous. Not hugely, but somewhat. And then let's say that somebody proves to me that the stereos were stolen, and then I decide to keep it anyway. That's a different matter, right? So going from ambiguity to outright criminality, I'm now in possession and retaining stolen goods. That's a different matter. And so parents can say, well, we didn't know, there was no evidence, that everyone around us is doing the same thing. It seemed a little sketchy maybe, but it was fine, and the Bible says or whatever. But then when you give them the actual arguments, you're proving to someone that they're in possession of stolen goods. And if they decide to keep those goods, then that is their preference. And then everything that they said before that was a defense is just revealed as not reasoning. It's not valid. Like if I decide to keep the stolen stereo, then everything I said before about, well, maybe it's not, I don't think it's stolen. These guys seem legit or whatever it is, right? That's all just revealed because I'm going to keep the stolen goods anyway. And so when you give people proof of the immorality of prior behaviors, and they decide to continue in that immorality, then they have become immoral. In other words, I can kind of lie to myself and say maybe the stereo wasn't stolen, or, it's not even lying because I have no proof. But once it's proven that the stereo was stolen and I keep it anyway, that's a different matter, right? Then I've crossed over. Then I am definitely in the realm of immoral, and then all of my prior defenses are kind of revealed as justifications for something I'm going to do anyway. Like even if you prove to me that my stereo is stolen. I'm going to keep it anyway. So too bad. Sucks to be you. So when you prove to your parents about prior immorality, that the prior immoral actions, and they refuse to back down or apologize or make restitution or anything, then it is like, hey man, I've now proven to you beyond the shadow of a doubt that the stereo was stolen, and if you keep it now, you're in a totally different moral category. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think, once I had that conversation with my mom in light of what my aunt said, that it was really, crossing the Rubicon with it. It's like I can't go back on this relationship because it's like I've revealed to you, it's like I know, and even if you're in denial, maybe she doesn't know, but I think by the tenor of the conversation is that, she had a lump in her throat and a knot in her stomach about it. It's like, we want to keep the skeleton in the closet. And so there is no going back from that once you have that moral knowledge. And my parents were generally the types to, like, my dad would, blow up at me one day and then, the next day is fine. And that's always very disorienting, obviously. And I don't want to run my life like that. And it seems like other people are fine to do that and they'll just carry on as if nothing happened. And for me, I just really don't want that. That just seems pretty dysfunctional for having a nice life. I really,
Yeah,
really
I mean,
didn't care for that.
most people who were circumcised will be keen on it, and I've actually had this conversation with people in the past where the wife is pregnant or the girlfriend is pregnant or whatever, and if it's a boy, are you going to circumcise? They say, well, sure, yeah, and then I give them the arguments, and if they decide that they are going to circumcise against reason and evidence, then they're Aztec priest baby mutilators, and they're out of my life. So again, you can't know before you know. I was not as consistently virtuous, to put it mildly, in my teens as I am now. I'm still not perfect, but I'm better than I was in my teens, for sure. And so am I going to go back in time and say, well, I was started out as a socialist, and now I know that socialism is immoral? Am I going to go back and say, oh, yes, you were as corrupt now. You were as corrupt then as you would be now if you embraced socialism, knowing all that you know. It was just a lack of knowledge. And then once I got better arguments, I accepted them. So if you've both had the conversations with your families about virtues and morals and peaceful parenting, and they are continuing in their path of violence and aggression towards children, then they're a crime family. You have created the criminality by giving them the arguments. And honestly, I'm not kidding about this. I view this as The Sopranos. I mean, would you be friends with Tony Soprano or the crazy Joe Pesci character from Goodfellas? Would you be friends with violent criminals? I mean, obviously not, right? I mean, I think we or would you let them babysit your children? Now, in many ways, though, parents who beat children, who hit children, are worse than mafia thugs. Why?
Oh, you're asking me? Well, I think at least the thugs are honest about it.
Well, but the parents are kind of honest about it. They'll say, yes, I hit you, usually, or I spanked you.
Hmm. I'm gonna need to call a Steph. I want a lifeline on it. My brain's blanking right now.
Anything from your wife. It's a tricky question.
Oh, she's been on baby duty.
So now the baby is more interesting than me. No, I'm just kidding. Good for you. Babies take priority, of course. So, yeah, what I would say is that for the most part, you kind of have to invite the mafia into your life. I'm not talking about sort of protection money or things like that, where you're just setting up a business. But one of the sort of famous story arcs in The Sopranos is the guy who's a gambler. He's a gambler, and he ends up owing a lot of money to Tony Soprano. And then Tony Soprano comes in and cleans out his business and all of that. And so you have to be a gambler. You have to borrow money from the mafia to end up under their control. You have to some degree, invite those kinds of criminals into your life. Whereas children do not invite their parents into their lives. Children are just born into them. The mafia also generally, or almost exclusively, will only target adults, not children. And you can call the cops on the mafia, and you can move away if you want. You can, leave town if you get into too much trouble and so on, right? So in many ways, the violence that the mafia enacts is often worse, usually worse than the violence that parents enact. The mafia will smash your kneecaps or curb you or whatever, cut off a finger. Obviously, parents aren't doing that except in the wild minority of cases, but the mafia is not as bad as parents in some ways. The violence is worse, but it's also less consistent because you can get beaten. I've talked to kids who got beaten a couple of times a week for 10 years. That is 1,000 times. Mafia generally won't beat you up 1,000 times. And again, you usually have to do something to bring the mafia into your life. Like I've lived my whole life without owing any money to organized crime. Miracle of miracles, it has actually been achieved. So I view parents who've been exposed, violent, abusive parents who've been exposed to peaceful parenting and rational arguments, the anti-spanking arguments and so on, and they refuse to apologize and they double down. Now they are criminals because they know that it's morally wrong. And when I say criminals, I'm not just talking like against the legal law, because Lord knows the legal law and morality have not a huge amount to do with each other, but they're moral criminals. They're criminals to the moral law. And if it was found out that, and of course, what you guys are talking about with regards to your families is not even just criminality regarding the moral law, like actual legal criminality that, as you said, this guy might not see the light of day until he's an old man, right? And so you have crime families. You are coming from organized crime families. And you can say, yes, but some people know and some people don't, and some people agree and some people don't. It's like, well, it's the old wife of the mafia don, like the Carmela Soprano argument, which is, well, the mafia guy's wife doesn't do any violence. She does threaten people from time to time. But, the mafia guy's wife isn't out there breaking people's kneecaps and so on. It's like, well, but she's supporting him. She's spending time with him. She's doing his laundry. She's having sex with him. She's, loving him. She's staying with him. She's right. And there's a therapist who says, this old Jewish therapist in one point of The Sopranos says, like, this blood money you have to get out. And he's won't even take payment for the therapy. And so the way that I would view it, if I were in your shoes, again, this is not to say it's right. This is the case that I'm making, is these are crime families. They prey upon children. They do some cover-up for criminals, and they don't take responsibility for this, right? So this is to your wife, as you were saying about your parents with this creepy guy with the cameras. They have no responsibility. It was just done unto them, even though I'm sure there were other people who got a vibe from this guy that was kind of negative and probably talked to them about it. And so you've got direct criminals within the family, alleged or, yet to be proven. But if it's true, then you have direct criminals. If it's true to the husband about your father, and you probably will never know for sure. And if it's true about this husband of one of your sisters, then you've got criminals into the family, and you've got criminals that were welcomed into the family. So the way that I view it is that the people who are direct criminals, or alleged criminals, or potential criminals, or whatever you want to say, the people who appear to have committed crimes or alleged to have committed crimes, I would view them as criminals from the moral law. And there's a crime involved no matter what, because people who are accused of a crime, there is either truth in the accusation, in other words, what is alleged about the husband's father or so on. There's either truth and that he did do these terrible things, or it's a false accusation, which itself is a crime. And so there's criminality. The moment that somebody is accused of a crime, either the accusation is true, in which case the criminality is on the part of the recipient of the accusation, or the accusation is false, in which case the person who's making the accusation has made a false accusation, which would be a crime. Now, I guess there could be some gray areas, and we'll sort of do a particular homage to that. Maybe you think it's true, but it turns out to not be true. The guy has a twin that you saw robbing the bank or whatever it is, right? I get all of that, but that's kind of rare as a whole, particularly with the kind of deep knowledge that's available. So the family is either full of pretty terrible people, criminals or the enablers of criminals, or it's full of pretty terrible people because you have people accusing innocent men of terrible crimes, in which case that's all terrible. So it's just this big swirling vat of filth in a way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And you gave a good example. This is rewinding a little bit, but about like making the case for circumcision. I did that exact thing with both my siblings. They each had a boy, and with my brother, I had called him up, and I had said like this is in no plain terms, this is immoral, this is evil. I had even sent him one of your videos, and I said, like, I'm just giving you the awareness that you're doing this in full light. And he did it anyway, and I didn't cut him off and like say not going to be able to tell me whether it's right or wrong, but it's just like and then let me say my sister's story, same thing, said don't do it, did it anyway, and I had found out like a while after the fact that I was really upset, and I just never felt too good about my siblings after that, because always in the back of my mind I was like, you guys committed a huge trespass, and I don't care if you don't think it's a trespass, but it is. But so fast forwarding, I guess, like I say, I don't have that close of a relationship with them. But what gets me, and this is kind of relevant to my wife too, is I almost feel like the kids are kind of held hostage to that situation. And
Sorry, whose kids?
like my nieces and nephews, and then for my wife's sisters, it's like when you have you like the kids, I like my nieces and nephews. I don't like the trespass that was done against them, and otherwise the parents are decent enough, as far as things go. And then same thing with her siblings. It's like or my wife's niece as well, the ones that hit by her sister. um so sorry if this is a little bit vague, but I'm just saying the people that are kind of caught in the undertow of those in the mafia, it's like those are the innocents, and you want to help them or like be there around for them. But it's like I can't step in the way of people's parenting, and I guess it's a sad situation where can't do anything about it. I really don't think if you've made the case and they ignore the case
Sorry, what do you mean you can't do anything about it? Of course you can.
for the children.
Well, let's say, let's take a somewhat analogous experience. Let's say let's say that your brother had stabbed some kid in the park and gotten away with it. What would your response be?
Well, I think that's terrible.
Well, that's a thought. What would your response be?
I would turn them in. Wouldn't let them get away with that.
No, let's say he'd gotten away with it. There was no proof, no evidence. Turning him in wouldn't do anything. He'd gotten away with it somehow.
Well, that's definitely what I'm wrestling with, is that I know people have done wrong, and
Okay, let's take it another way.
yeah.
Let's say that your brother had genitally mutilated his daughters.
And nobody knows about it, or other
Well,
people
let's
would
just
know
say,
about
for
it.
whatever reason, he's gotten away with it.
I think that's a horrible thing, and what would I do about it? I can't bring that back for them. I can't make the kids that are hit unhit, and
Well,
I can't go parent to them.
if your brother had stabbed a kid in the park, would you stay in contact with him?
No,
If your brother had genitally mutilated his daughters, would you stay in contact with him?
no, I'd hope not, but
Well, there you
I'm
go.
still staying in contact with them doing the circumcision. My question was more directed, and sorry I feel unclear right now. That's why I'm reaching out, is to help clarify some of this thinking. Um, I just think about the kids though. They're still living their lives, and I guess I bring some sort of small light to their lives, and I guess I can't do that then. I don't know.
Well, of course, if your brother was a criminal and you didn't want him in your life, then you wouldn't really be able to see his kids, right?
Right.
And listen, I don't know whether you should have your brother in your life or not. I just
Right.
want you to be conscious of the cost benefit, because what you're doing is you're saying, look, and I understand this is not a criticism. What you're doing is you're saying, look, Steph, there are positive things about staying in my brother's life. I get to spend time with his kids. I bring some happiness and joy to them. I like his kids. So there are positives, right?
Yeah.
I'm not going to disagree with that. Of course, you know the relationship. I don't. So I'm fine with that being the starting point. But why is that an incomplete analysis?
Well, I would say I've thought a lot about my own kid, and then when he gets older, and if he's around nieces and nephews that are hit or had these things done to them, I don't want that to spill over. So I do see it as a sort of environmental toxin.
Okay, so there's a benefit in that you might bring some happiness, I'm sure you do, to his kids. And the costs which you're talking about are pragmatic, like it could be negative for your child or children going forward to be in that environment. What else is negative?
Well, I think I've been thinking a lot lately about how I want how I want UPB to be high up in my values, that it's, you know, that I place the proper severity to that, and then other things that aren't UPB violations, that they get their proper due. So I think if I were to water down somebody violating UPB, that wouldn't be great. Wouldn't be great for my self esteem. Going back to like the thought, value, emotion triangle matrix, whatever you want to call it.
Right. So it's going to dilute your integrity because you can't tell the truth. You can't be honest in that environment.
Right.
And listen, there's times where we can't be honest, but it's important to recognize that so that the cost doesn't take us by surprise.
Yeah, I agree. And really, since having my baby and knowing that he's going to be conscious, before long, I think that's why there's an urgency behind um, tying up some loose ends or really getting our thinking straight on this. Is that for us, it's its own thing, and obviously we want to value our own lives and not just like diminish our value to the point where like we'll put ourselves through hell, but not our son. So I want it for myself. I want it for my son. I want it for my wife. Like I say, I want a nice life here. So I do want to figure this stuff out. And I totally agree that if I'm in a relationship where I'm thinking in the back of my mind, like whatever you say, it's like you're a bastard. You freaking cut your kid's foreskin off and you don't think anything about it. Like I do, but that's like with my parents. I've thought about these things a lot, and I don't know whether they have or haven't thought about it a lot, but I don't think they really care about it as much. And it's like that's bullshit. Really, it
Well, hang
is.
on.
I mean,
So, what other deficiencies in your mind do you see in your brother's parenting? Let's just talk about the one particular instance.
um, like he'll say to his kid, I've seen it before, where he's like, "Oh, that deserves a pow pow." Like he'll put it to a more diminutive tone to disguise hitting, and like he wouldn't even hit hard. But then I'm thinking, and I told him this before. I'm like, well, if you're gonna hit, don't you want it to be hard enough that it's um recognizable and all that sort of stuff? And I don't agree with them just kind of doing the career thing. They have more money than they really need, and somebody should stay home with these kids and watch them and all that sort of
Oh, are
stuff.
they
So yeah,
in daycare? Is that right?
yeah.
Okay. All right. So you've got kids in daycare who've been circumcised and are being hit.
Yeah, I agree. It's a very limited relationship, and yeah, I think for me, I tend to just let things peter out. And if somebody were to come around, I'm not doing the grand finale, and I don't think I need to. I don't have like some macho fantasy where it's like, here's why you're a moral criminal and all that sort of stuff. Um, but if somebody were to ask me, I think I would give it to them straight up. But you're right that none of those things have been fully resolved. It's like I said
Sorry,
earlier
none of
with
which things have been fully resolved.
like the trespass of like, okay, I warned you, don't circumcise your kid. You did it anyway. And like, there's no follow up with that. I just looked weak and folded because it's like, okay, you're going to be in my life anyway. I still did it. Now what? So yeah, now thinking back, I'm like, I don't like that. That doesn't sit right with me.
Well, and of course, the beautiful thing about being a parent is your life becomes very simple, which is that it's not what's best for your kids, the kids of your brother. It's what's best for your child and your children.
Right. Yeah. I feel, yeah, like almost aggressively so, where I'm like, I'm sorry for what is going on, like with my wife's siblings and stuff. And it's like, maybe you could circle back to him someday in some circumstances, but it's like I got to protect my kid, and I can't let other people's problems and sorrows bring down my own family. Like I just can't, I cannot take on that burden and let myself, hurt my own family and trying to like halfway save somebody else. I mean, you've made a great analogy before. It's like you can't make insane people sane. You're just going to become insane yourself.
Well, I try not to have relationships in my life where I can't be honest because they're not real relationships anyway. I mean, you can't be honest with your brother. I mean, you can chip away at things or whatever, right? But you can't be honest with him and say, it's stomach turning that you mutilated your kids' genitals. It's stomach turning that you threatened to hit your children. It's stomach turning that you guys are chasing money and putting your kids in daycare. Like this is bad stuff as a whole, right? And you can give him all the data behind it and all the facts and reasoning behind it. But you can't be honest. So what you're doing is you're teaching his children that virtue has no power, that corruption and aggression runs everything, and that virtue has no particular integrity because virtue will just hang out with the corrupt helplessly and falsify the truth and the good. So what are you teaching his children?
That's a good way to put it, Steph. I definitely agree. And I had said back in the day when I was telling my brother, don't circumcise your kid, I'm like, if you do it, I'll tell your kids someday when they're of age. So I guess, maybe when they're 18 and say, hey, what happened to that uncle? I don't know what they'd say about me, but if they wanted to be back in my life, I could tell them it's like I wanted to be there, but I also didn't want to compromise my values. And maybe they understand, maybe they wouldn't. I mean, it's a sad situation. It really is.
Yeah. I tried to teach my brother, I tried to teach your dad about how to be a good parent. He didn't want to listen. I'm sorry. Like, I wish things had been different. I have no control. I have no authority. I'm not the parent. And he wasn't doing anything illegal. So, I mean, I can only reason with him. Your father is the reason I wasn't in your life.
Yeah, I really I'm thinking back to earlier in our conversation where it's like we're the modern abolitionists, and there's so many loud voices. Like even my head, I don't want to give heed to those voices, but I just hear them because like you say, it's your first language, where it's just like giving excuses for everybody, and I'm like, I don't want to have that excuse in my head, and or I don't want to have that in my actions, and but to other people, they're just going to be like, well, he was a nice guy otherwise, or like he did this and that. Or like they don't see it as a big of a trespass. And, but to me, it is a trespass. And I do have the arguments behind me. And I don't want to slip into some sort of relativism or like moral accounting and say, well, they do this good and this is bad. And like, here's how they come out as a wash. Like, I don't want to do that for my son. I want to
Well, okay.
come
So,
out and say, I'm doing
and the
good.
easiest way to resolve these issues is to picture once your son knows all about your values, right? And knows all about what your brother has done. Again, just to take one particular example. So your brother has done what he's done, some terrible stuff. And your son knows all about what your brother has done and what your values are, and sees you go over and being happy and chatty and friendly and playing with the kids and not raising any objections. How does your son look at you in that circumstance?
Well, he'd see me as a hypocrite and he'd see me as weak. And I totally agree with you, Steph. I really do, because I think about that a lot, where I don't want to be put in situations where I'm seen that way. I want everything to be in line.
Okay, so isn't that your answer? It doesn't really matter what's best for your brother's kids because you have no control over that. And I wouldn't even argue that it is best for your brother's kids to
Yeah.
compromise your virtues and your values. You're just teaching them that virtues and values are meaningless and that aggression and sentimentality win the day, which is actually going to train them out of being moral. But the most important thing is how your kids look at you when they know the truth. Are they going to look at you and say, well, why? I mean, this guy's really dedicated to peaceful parenting. Why is he hanging out with people who hit their kids? Why is he friendly? Why doesn't he say anything?
I agree. And can I give another example?
Sure.
Um, my wife's sister, the one that was a stripper with the niece with the boyfriend, who actually just recently died of an overdose, whatever. And so whatever that little girl, like I say, there's a lot of my wife really loves that little girl, and like we tried to set up like a little bit of a boundary. It's like, hey, at least when we're at, the in-laws house, don't hit your daughter. And so it's like, let it happen off screen. And we just like gamed out a lot of scenarios where if our kid was over and like aggression happened, and what would we do in that situations, and like yelling and stuff. And I don't like any of that. I'm like, I just don't want to be in an environment where I got to be on edge about that sort of stuff. That just sucks. And so I've really been trying to negotiate and navigate with my wife of how we want to do that. Cause to me, the clear scenario is like, unless you guys are all on the same page, like I say, in the very intimate relationships, it's just not going to work. At least that's what the logic is showing me.
Right. So, I mean, if your son comes to you when he's older and knows the truth about your virtues and your values and your wife's virtues and values, and then sees all the people, not just to pick on your brother, but all the people you've been hanging out with, and says, help me square the circle, Dad, I don't understand. I mean, should I as a teenager hang out with people who completely oppose my values? I don't like drinking. Should I hang out with drunks? I don't like sex before marriage, or at least sex when you're young. Should I hang out with promiscuous people? I don't like drugs. Should I hang out with people who do drugs? Like, help me understand. If your values don't connect with anything you do, should I follow that path?
Yeah, I think it's clear when it's down the tunnel of time. Wife, did you want to say anything? Kind of been out of the mix for a while.
Um, I don't know. I 100% agree with your points, and it makes a lot of sense. So I'm not arguing that at all. It's just, is there a would there be like a good or kind or graceful way to exit the children's lives? Because my niece, the one that we were referencing, the first year of her life, she lived with me in my family. I lived with my family, and I was extremely involved in her first year. Like, we spent every day together, and I did like more motherly things for her than her own mother did. So I feel extremely attached to her, and I feel like I owe it to her to not just up and leave her life, because she's very important to me. So how do I? Is there a good way to navigate that?
I mean, no, there's no good way to do it because it's not fun
Right.
at all. And backing out of relationships is tough. I mean, I know your husband said the fade out. I mean, the fade out is relatively okay. But I mean, if you really want to go out with a bang, not a whimper, then how old are his kids?
They only have. Wait, my niece.
No, sorry, this is your in the case of your husband's brother.
Oh.
5 and 7.
5 and 7, right?
Mhm.
I mean, if you really don't want to go out with a bang, I'm not saying you should, but if you wanted to, then you could be as honest as you possibly could. And at some sort of family dinner, you can say to your brother, "Are you still hitting your kids? Kids, are you guys still getting hit? Do you get, what did he call it? A boom boom?" Or I can't remember what he said.
Pow pow.
A pow pow. Yeah, you guys still getting hit? Is that still a thing? Right? And then if they say yes, say, "Well, I just want you guys to know, hitting children is wrong. Hitting children is worse than hitting a spouse, a husband, a wife." And, the funny thing is he probably hits you guys because you hit each other. So that's kind of confusing, right? So I just wanted to let you know that your father and your mother are completely in the wrong for hitting you. And I've told them about this. I've told them all about this. I've given them all the data, and they still want to keep doing it. Now, whether that's wise or not, I don't know, because it's not my family and this is complicated stuff. But if you do that, and then you probably would end up being banned from contact with the children, then there wouldn't be any doubt in their minds as to why they're not seeing you.
Yeah, I agree, and I've done that in its own way. Like when I first met my wife, and I say that she wasn't very knowledgeable about peaceful parenting, to put it lightly, or she was even pro smacking, as they like to call it. And I would I would get in arguments in front of her little sisters and say like, that's not right, and this, that, and the other. And I guess even to this day, the consequences of me, entering to that family have have rippled through it. Like one of her sisters is almost come of age, and she's totally on board with us. And it's like, it's just awesome to have an ally in the ranks. And the in-laws are, the kids are like aged out of hitting the children, as they always do. But I definitely have it within me to be provocative, like you're saying, not saying that you have to do that, but there are options of how we want to make our values heard. And for me, that's uh, that's probably one of the bigger things. Is like people they go all around and they rattle off their opinions, like they know who's from Adam, and they just say them. And they're like, why don't I have that same level of confidence? I could do that too. I mean, obviously, considering safety and opportunity and all that, but I just agree that people they go around and they'll hit their kid and not think twice about it. It's like, well, I want to be just as fearless for my values of speaking up for children as they are in a bad way.
Yeah, but it's really tough to do that. I mean, obviously, you don't need me to tell you that. Sorry for stating the blindingly obvious. It's really tough
Oh yeah,
because your brother can run to a million people, a billion people, 8 billion people who are going to agree with him
right.
and say that you're crazy, he's hysterical, he's under the spell of an internet cult, or whatever, right? I mean, and so he's going to be able to run to people who agree with him, which is what most people do when challenged. This is not a majority position. I mean, if you were to say to your brother, you shouldn't hit your wife, I mean, he'd probably duck his eyes a little bit because that's been more established in the world, right? But not hitting your children is still largely incomprehensible to people, even though it's far worse than hitting your wife, because your wife is there by choice and children aren't. Your wife is legally independent. Your children aren't. Your wife is an adult. Your children are children, of course, and smaller and weaker and powerless. So if you wanted to, it would be an amazing moment for the children. They would remember it for the rest of their lives. And it is actually the best way to get your brother to stop hitting his children, is to have a conversation like that. Because the next time he goes to hit his children, everybody in the room will remember that conversation at the dinner table. And it might hold his hand. It might stay his blows. And even if it doesn't, his children will know that at least someone in the world has said it's totally wrong.
Well, something I've noticed with my sisters, my younger sisters, and like my husband said, they're not of age to be spanked anymore. It's not a prevalent thing. But my mother primarily, sometimes my father, are very verbally abusive, I would say, like in the sense that they growing up they yelled constantly. And even now my mom, she's like less, but yells a lot. And um my my little sister, who is very against spanking, and she's very bold. She's much bolder than I ever was, and she will outwardly correct my parents and say, like, "You shouldn't do that. You can't do that." Same with my sister, who has the little girl who she hits. She'll correct her, and um, she's very brave. But at the same time, it's like when that happens, my parents double down on it, and they get worse. It's like they feel like they've lost control and they need to regain it again. And so with that, if I bring things up to my parents or my siblings bring things up to my parents, it's almost like things get infinitely worse and until it fizzles down and they forget that we ever said it. So it's like I feel like if I say anything to my parents, the children get punished. And so then I feel like I'm
Well, hang on,
in a
but would you say it in front of the children or not? Assuming age-appropriate language skills.
right. There are things that I have said um on my own, so away from the kids, but there are things that I'm pretty, I would say pretty open about, and my siblings are around for it. And it's not anything like crazily explicit. Explicit. It's not like I'm saying wild things, but they'll just be casual things that I'll mention that I disagree with. And in one way or another, whether it's in private or in public, it comes back to my siblings, and I just feel like it's I don't know, it's hard.
Right. Yeah, so I don't know. I don't know for sure what the best way to approach it is. In general, I don't have people around who harm their children. Won't have that in my life.
Mm.
And again, I'm not saying that I'm some template for what everyone has to do. I'm just telling you, for me, both the morals and the cost benefit are not worth it,
Mhm.
because it harms me. Just from a practical standpoint, it harms me more than it helps the children. And in harming me, I can't imagine it's that beneficial to the children. Because, of course, anything that you say that is critical of the parents while the children are around oftentimes the children will use that in conflicts with the parents. Well, Aunt so-and-so or Uncle so-and-so said that you were blah, 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 right? And they'll distort it a little bit and they'll use it exaggerated and so on to try and win in the moment. And it's just a very difficult, tricky, volatile, unpleasant situation. And I don't mind those things if it's in the purpose of telling the truth. But I try not to manifest morality when I'm helpless to affect anything for the better.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense. And there have been other experiences too with my siblings. Like, I mean, really silly instance, but like my little sister, she has to give up her room every time these people stay over. Like it is just automatic, give it up. You don't get to sleep in there anymore. They don't ask her. They don't, there's no reasoning, anything. And so anyway, her room gets given up and then they leave it a mess. It's destroyed. And so then she complained to my parents saying like, hey, I just don't feel like my space is being respected. And my parents blew up at her and were like, well, like had even used the wording of like, you're a brat. You don't get to say that. So I corrected my parents and had said like, don't call her names. You don't get to call her names and you're not being respectful of her space. And how can you figure out an arrangement that works for everybody? And at the end of the day, they reluctantly apologized and worked out some agreement. But throughout this conversation, they told me it repeatedly, like, well, she's a liar and you can't believe her because she lies about stuff like that. And she calls you and complains to get you on her side. And then you come to me. So basically they were just blaming my sister for all these problems and saying she creates problems within the family. And my sister now has very, very bad issues with, I would even call it like her self-worth. Like there's a lot of times she'll come to me and just say like, why does nobody like me? And she's not a little girl. Like she's almost an adult. And so she's not little. And so like, I mean, in the scenario where she's older, I've always joked like, come and move in with me. But I've always said like, hey, you can come see me whenever you want. That creates a lot of tension with my parents. I don't know, like she's older. She's not like a little girl. What do I do with her?
And she says, why don't people like me?
Yeah, she's called me before, like sobbing and asking why does nobody in our family like me? Everybody thinks I'm a bad kid and I'm just trying to do my best. And it's not like I'm just trying to do my best. Like she genuinely does very good. She's a very good girl.
So what do you
And
say?
What did I say to her?
Yeah.
I told her that it's not true what people say about her, that they're just angry because they feel bad about themselves and that she doesn't deserve to be spoken to like that.
They're angry because they feel bad about themselves. Interesting.
Yes. I think that my parents are very insecure in their parenting because they see it and they recognize that they've messed up a lot in the past. And there's things that they will acknowledge very mildly, like, oh, yeah, we shouldn't have yelled at you, but everybody yells at their kids. And so I think that when my sister comes to my mom and is like, well, you can't yell at me, my mom returns and is like, well, you're a brat and you don't get to say that, because I think that she knows it's wrong and she's embarrassed that someone's calling it out because no one's called it out ever.
And I don't mean this in any negative way at all. That is such a quintessentially female formulation. And again, nothing negative. Well, they just feel bad about themselves, and that's why they appear to be blah, 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 blah. It's like, maybe they're just cruel. Maybe they're just vicious. Maybe they're
Yeah.
just sadistic. Maybe they're just nasty. Maybe they're just mean. But it's like,
Yeah.
there's this layer of like, because you're inviting people to feel sympathy.
Mhm.
Your parents just feel bad about themselves.
Yeah.
And
That's true.
what
That's
that
not
means
the
is that she
same
can't
thing,
get angry.
Right. That's not fair.
And again, when I say female, listen, males need females, and we need female perspective, but women also need male perspective. So
Yeah.
let me just turn to your husband for a sec. You know this situation, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, so these are parents who call their kid, selfish and bratty and entitled and all this kind of really, really nasty, nasty, ugly stuff. And what do you think their motive is?
I think that they've done a lot of trespasses and that they still are, and that they're pretty morally sluggish. And honestly, I'm pretty tired of the relationship. Like the more I hear about my wife's childhood, it's like they did that, and then it's just like my wife gets friendly with them and stuff. So honestly, I get kind of like I don't want to go up and hang out with them. I don't have these problems at my house. Like saying with this creepy camcorder guy. I'm like, I don't want to hear about that stuff anymore. I want to talk about, how great my garden is, or just like victories that I'm having. Or like, it's just, it's not as interesting to me. But I know that I need to be a leader for my wife and to help her navigate the situation. Because, like I say, we have a 10-year age gap, and like I think she's doing amazing for where she is in her life, and that like I knew that I was marrying somebody younger, and that she knew that she was marrying somebody older. So like where she is right now with her family is not where I was with my family at that
Okay,
age.
sorry, this
So
is a little bit of a ramble. I hope you don't mind interrupting.
yeah,
And listen, you guys are very nice people, and that's got some great strengths. I admire and respect that for what it's worth.
mhm.
But I think if you're going to take the moral path, you're going to have to toughen up just a tiny bit. Let me give you an example. So let's say that it's a girl, right? So let's say that your daughter is 5 and you hire a babysitter. A babysitter seems nice or whatever, but just to be on the safe side, you put in a nanny cam or a teddy bear cam, or sorry to use hidden cameras after our earlier conversation, but it's your property, it's fine. And let's say you come back and the babysitter has been snarling at your little girl and saying, "You're just a selfish, entitled little brat." And she's crying and she feels wretched. And you come back and you see this footage and the babysitter is still there. What would you say and do?
I think you'd wring her neck.
Well, you'd feel pretty aggressive, right?
Yeah.
Now, would you say, well, you just say these things because you kind of feel bad about yourself and, plea for understanding and so on, right? I mean, where's your feral protection side?
Yeah. I don't think that there would be much grace for somebody in that situation. So
But
yeah,
this
it
is the
makes
same
sense.
situation, but even worse, because at least a babysitter, you just don't hire her again. This girl has gone through torrents of hostile verbal abuse. You said she's almost an adult for like 16, 17 years, right? As opposed to one
Yeah.
night. You'd be really upset one night. One babysitter, couple hours. This girl's had 17 years of this.
Yeah.
And you're all like, well, but they feel bad about themselves and that's why they do this. And it's no. Why would your own little girl be so worthy of fierce protection, but you're pleading to this other young woman to have understanding and perhaps even sympathy because the parents feel bad about themselves? Did you see the difference?
Yeah, I do. I mean, you're right. In the wording that I gave, it is implying that she should have sympathy for them.
Or at least
I
strive
don't.
to understand them, or there's some
Right.
level of forgiveness there. They just feel bad
Yeah.
about themselves, like it's just some causeless thing. I mean, maybe they're
Yeah.
just horrible bullies. I mean, maybe things aren't that complicated. Maybe they're horrible bullies who trash talk their own child because it's the easiest way to control and bully her.
Yeah.
People can just be assholes from time to time.
It's true.
Now, we could look back on some big psychological cause and effect or whatever, but you wouldn't do that with the babysitter, right?
Yeah.
That's my point. You'd be enraged at the babysitter, and you'd kick her out without paying her, and you'd try to make sure nobody else ever hired her again. I mean, you'd go scorched earth on her, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
So, help me understand the difference.
Yeah. I don't know. I do know. I I see a lot of issues with my parents, and I'm very quick to criticize them when I'm not around. But to their faces, I have a very, very hard time doing it. And so I think that there's just like the familiarity of it. It's just that I love having a family. I don't particularly like the family I have, but I do love having a family. And so um, whether I recognize it or not, I know that I am very quick to protect them and defend them, even when I see them making mistakes. Yeah, it's just a cope because I'm very scared to cut off my family because the idea of not having family is terrifying because, growing up with 10 siblings, my parents saying a family is everything and you can't ever cut off your family. That's so wrong. Like to this day, my mom says that she doesn't respect my oldest brother because he decided to be not a part of the family anymore. And she will openly say she doesn't respect him.
Well,
And
yeah,
so,
no, hang on. So, a part of it is sorry to interrupt, part of it is in the phraseology. So, when you say, my brother cut off his family, that's not accurate. Your father is protecting the family he chose from the family he never chose.
yeah,
Your brother is protecting his children from highly toxic, dysfunctional, and aggressive people. Your brother is protecting his integrity from people who force him to lie if he's around. In other words, they escalate punishments if he tells the truth.
Yeah.
So if your kids, for some reason, got in with a really bad friend group and you said, listen, man, you got to not hang out with these kids. They're stealing cars. They're doing drugs. And then your teenager said, but then I won't have any friends. What would you say?
Well, what's the point of keeping people around, having friends that are bad quality? You don't even like them.
Well, and your crappy pretend friends are keeping actual good friends away.
Right.
Right. So, again, these are arguments that if your kid said, I really don't want to hang around with these car-stealing, drug-taking people because, I think they're pretty toxic. And you said, look, you're cutting off all your friends. That's the equivalent argument.
Yeah, I don't think I would be. I'd be trying to get him to keep him around very much.
So it's in the language. It's in the language. Now, I want to be very clear about this because this is probably at the heart of things. And I say this with no judgment whatsoever. This is not a preferred or not preferred state. This is just action and consequences. If you value family above integrity, and again, I know that sounds like it's a loaded question and how dare you, it's a genuine statement. If you want family over virtue, you must drop virtue. Otherwise, you will be tortured and you will neither end up with the benefits of family nor the benefits of virtue. It is a self-tortured state to be half and half. If you choose virtue, choose it all the way, which means talk to people, evaluate relationships in terms of virtue, and those striving towards virtue are your welcome friends and allies and companions, and those who reject and attack virtue are people to be escaped. But if you want family over virtue, you must drop the virtues, because you will end up with neither virtue nor any even felt connection with family.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I mean, I'm sure you've had people in your life who have relationships that they constantly complain about.
Yeah, it's pretty draining to hear about.
Right. So, if there's some woman who's like, oh, my boyfriend, he never calls, he never brings me flowers, he's lazy, he just plays video games, he does this, he does that. What do you say at some point?
Sounds like a terrible guy. If you're going to keep talking about it, you should do something about it. And if you're not, then stop talking to me about it.
Right. So don't be in a situation of eternally having higher standards that other people fail to meet, right?
Right. Yeah.
So if you,
that's
and this is just a very stark choice. It is, and I, of course, in general, I'll be honest, I would vote for virtue and all of that. But if I had the choice for you guys, I had some magical switch, right? And if the only two choices were virtue plus family of origin or no virtue plus family of origin, I would choose no virtue plus family of origin every time. Because right now, you're there and you're judgy and you're prickly and you're discontented and you're critical and you're stressed. Did you see it? Like, that's just it's almost like a recreation of childhood.
Yeah.
And I would desperately not want that for you guys.
Yeah. So I had a question about my family. So my brother, and I called him today and spoke to him for a few hours just about this whole thing, and he feels very similarly about a majority of it, and he wants to talk to my parents about this. But I don't know, like I guess it's a really hard question. Like, does it seem like there's any hope for me to talk to my parents and get them to be new people that are okay to be around, or like I think that I'm going to talk to them regardless of however life plays out. I'm going to talk to them and tell them my virtues and how I feel, and basically explain to them that if it doesn't line up, then they don't get to be in my life. But I mean, like, what are what are the odds of that going well? Or should I? I don't know. I just feel like,
Well, I mean, obviously, it's a long conversation, but what's the brief version of what you would say to your parents?
I would tell them that the way I was raised was wrong and I expect an apology. I would tell them that they are fully at fault for the things that have happened within the family, these big tragedies, and say that they need to apologize to me and my siblings. And my parents need to just overall get better at taking accountability for things. And going forward, they would have to just display these virtues that I value and be somebody worth keeping around. Basically, be totally different people.
Be totally different people.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that's where I reached.
All right. And if you had to bet money on whether they would change for the better in some reasonable time frame, how much would you bet?
Haven't done anything. Like $20. They very little because I think that they have been given the opportunity in some small way. Like when my brother, all this came out that he had sexually abused my nephew, it was uh my oldest brother, the one who didn't have the child involved, he was just kind of watching the whole thing play out. He had said to my parents that unless you have this guy, because he was an adult, like, well, he turned into an adult like very shortly after this came out. They he did, my brother had just said, unless you fully remove this kid from your family, I won't have anything to do with you, and here's why I don't feel safe. And my parents had just said, well, I can't do that. We're unwilling to do that. And so it's not exactly the same situation, but they were unwilling to change and happily, not happily, but pretty willingly let another child in that entire family and their grandkids go.
So why would it be different with you? There could be a good reason. I'm just not sure what it is.
I think I think it might be different because I'm not asking them to cut a person out of their life without them fully agreeing to it. I think
No, but that's easier. It's easier to give people practical solutions rather than general be better people principles.
okay. Well, I can think.
Like if I were to say to you, if I was a nutritionist, and I were to say to you, just eat better, as opposed to here's your meal plan down to the last detail,
Right.
which would be easier to follow.
Right, the meal plan, obviously. Yeah. I don't like I maybe I'm just optimistic because feel very close to my sisters and I would just love to have this amazing life and I would love to get apologies for my childhood, but I honestly I don't have much reason why it would be different. I think maybe I would have history on my side of saying like, "Hey, you've lost two kids who don't speak to you, and you have multiple children coming forward saying you need to change." Like maybe it would be
Okay. So how would they change? What would they do? Do you think they would go to therapy, or
I would
what would they
want
do? It's
them
not, you can't just wake up and will yourself to change, right?
right. Well, yes, I would want them to seek therapy and I don't know, like there's get into some good resources like some of your stuff or similar things where
Okay. Do they
they
want to change?
no, I don't think so.
Okay. So do you think that they'll change under threat?
No.
So if they won't change on their own, if they don't want to change, and they won't change under threat, how are they going to change?
The only thing I could see is that uh, what has happened in the past where children leaving them, it continues into the future until they're all alone, and then maybe they feel that they should change. But even then, I mean, what's the point? They don't gain anything out of changing once all their children have already left them. So I don't know. I don't really see them changing.
And look, I mean, it's hard to say never because anything's theoretically possible. I think I've had over the last 22 years maybe one or two calls from parents who changed,
Wow.
genuinely changed based upon what their children did. But it's kind of like winning the lottery. I mean, you can win the lottery, but you should never plan on it, right?
Right. Yeah.
You should never put all your eggs. Oh, I don't need to save for retirement. I'll just play the lottery, right?
Yes.
So
Right.
there's like functionally impossible.
Yeah.
It's functionally possible that you have some long lost billionaire relative and you're going to get left $10 million in his will and it's just going to show up tomorrow. Could happen. It's not impossible, right? But it's not how you plan your life, right?
Yeah.
Now, the other thing too, if you're asking two people to change, then you are asking them to reverse the basis of their relationship. See, they love each other, as they say, they're attached to
Well,
each other, they prefer each other, and you're asking them to become the opposite of who they pair bonded with. What's that going to do to their marriage?
well, the only thing I can go up in the past is like obviously it's going to shake the foundation of their marriage, but um, in the past, like my parents, they they had a really strange the way they met. Like, my dad was on vacation in Australia and met my mom, and so they met from, like, across the world, and within a year, they got married, and, they had no religion at that point, and they were just doing whatever they wanted to do, and lived extremely, I would call it, like, secular lives beforehand, where it was just no morals, really. And then they got married, and within, like, a couple years into their marriage, they just decided they were gonna become, like, super hardcore Christians, crazy hardcore, and so they just changed everything about their lives and their marriage, and, I wouldn't say, like, that's where the hitting came from. That was something that was prevalent in my mom's childhood, but I don't know, I guess they have that past experience of, like, totally changing
And
their
why did they change, do you
lives.
think?
I'm honestly not sure. I would say probably the the want, like, the desire for community, because all the community where my mom eventually left Australia and moved to America, and all of my dad's friends, family, community, they were all extremely hardcore Christians, and so I would say probably
Oh, so
the
your
desire for
mother and
community.
they just adapted, and based on the number of kids, you kind of need community, right? So they
Yeah,
just adapted to the local environment because it was beneficial to them. I'm not saying that's all it was, but I think that would be a primary motive.
yeah. No, I agree with you. I would
Okay, so
say
it
that.
benefited them.
Yeah.
Okay. Is this confrontation and them having to admit that they've been corrupt or immoral or both, is that going to benefit them?
Not in a majority of ways. I would benefit them, and obviously, like, the quality of life and the relationship with their children, but they don't view it that way. So, um, no, because a lot of their peers are still very serious Christians, like, they that hit their children even more violently than my parents did, and so I it would just totally rip them out of their environment again.
So they would lose salvation, perhaps they would lose their love for each other. They would lose the support of their community. They would lose their church. They would lose their friendships.
Right.
And so if they're making decisions on cost benefit, and we can say, of course, yes, but the benefit down the road is going to be blah, blah, blah. But that's a pretty big cost, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
And how would you sell the benefit? I'm not saying it's impossible. I mean, I've talked from the very beginning about how philosophy is it's a lot of costs for sure.
Yeah.
But how would you sell them the benefit?
I honestly think it would be extremely hard to sell it to them. I just think that the thing I would fall back on, which I don't know if this is good or bad, would just be the threat of, "This is what you do or you leave my life," which isn't really selling it to them, but, um, I honestly, I don't know how I would do it. I just think that everything I present to them would just oppose everything they've believed for years and years, so they wouldn't see much benefit in it.
And there would be a lot of destabilization. People don't just, as you know, they don't just wake up one day and change. It's a very ragged line with a general upward trend.
Right, yeah.
And so there are times when it would be harder than it was in the past. And that could go on for weeks or months, that they
Yeah.
would be more primitive, more reactive. And then, it's a ragged line. It's not like Bitcoin has gone from 0 to like 80K in a straight line, right? It's up, it's down. There's a general upward trend, but there's lots of peaks and valleys along the way. And would you
Mhm.
be along for that ride with them?
I think I would be willing to if I saw benefit and, like, I
Wrong
saw them
answer.
succeed. Oh,
I'm so sorry to be annoying. I'm so sorry. I don't normally say that.
no.
Why is that the wrong answer?
I'm not sure, I don't know.
Well, how many kids do you guys want?
Oh, depends on who you ask. At least 4 or 5.
Okay, well, lovely. I envy you. Fantastic. Good for you. Okay, so going along with your parents' hysterical up and down emotional journey towards some kind of better state over the next 5 or 10 years, does that benefit your children?
No, not at all.
So that's why I said, wrong answer.
Right, right. No,
Wrong
you're right.
answer.
Yeah,
What
that's true.
benefits your children is your integrity, your peace of mind, and seeing their parents have quality relationships with good people.
Right. Yeah.
Am I wrong? Tell me I'm wrong. I'm happy to be corrected.
No, I agree with you. I think that it's consistency is incredibly important and like, for children, and
So watching
to see
you as
that.
a mom be whipped around like the tail on a hysterical kite in a thunderstorm all over the place. Your parents calling at 3 a.m. sobbing and then really happy and then cratering and then they're going to
Right.
divorce and then they're going to get back together and then they break with their therapist and then they get a new therapist. Is that good for your kids?
That's terrible.
It's terrible. So that's why it's the wrong answer. Sorry.
Point.
I hate
Go
to say
for
that because I don't like to tell people what to do. And it's kind of true, but don't jump off a cliff and don't get involved with potential parental better behavior that's going to be chaotic and catastrophic and up and down for years.
Right. Something I've seen in the past though that like my older sister she just undyingly defends my mom. I just don't know why. My parents in general, but like my mom having a lot of kids, obviously in my childhood, she was just like worn thin all over the place and took it out on her children terribly by screaming and hitting and all the things.
Oh my
So,
gosh, you're still doing that thing? Oh, so female. And again,
so
there's nothing wrong with it. It's good to have sympathy, but we gotta be in the middle. Having
right.
all of
Well,
these kids, she was worn ragged. She chose all of that. She chose to have those kids. You can't blame. Like it takes work to have kids, and
yes.
you can't say that she was somehow a victim of having a bunch of kids since she chose to have a bunch of kids.
Yeah. Yes.
And she
Well,
wasn't run ragged by having a lot of children. I mean, I know people who've got 6 or 7 children. They're peaceful parents, and it's pretty great.
mm,
So no, she was run ragged because she didn't have the respect of her children because she was aggressive towards them.
yes.
And they didn't want to listen to her, and they fought her, and they rolled their eyes, and they complied for a while, but then they would seek ways around it. And so your mother was not in a bad mood because she had a lot of kids. She was in a bad mood because she hadn't treated those children well and still wanted to rule over them.
Yeah. Yeah. You're right. I've
She was
seen
in a
it.
bad mood because she'd been in a bad mood, not because of the number of
No,
kids. Sorry, go ahead. Because
no,
otherwise you're going to sit there and say in your mind, right? Well, if it's the number of kids that made my mother be in a negative state of mind, obviously run ragged or whatever, then as you have more kids, you're going to be more concerned about that yourself.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
sorry, go ahead.
No, you're good. Um, but my older sister, she was right in the middle of it because she wasn't little, whereas for me, like it was kind of foggy. I don't really remember all of my childhood. It was just kind of different. My sister, she was older and very present for a majority of this really terrible, terrible time in our lives. And the other day, I had even spoken to her, and I was just saying like, yeah, I'm so sick of mom. Like I just can't do this anymore. She's great. She's kind of crazy. And my sister had just said, "Well, she's so much better than she used to be, and she doesn't yell as much, and she's trying really hard." And so it's almost like my sister was saying, like, "Well, she's capable of change, and she's trying to do better. So you need to give her grace because, well, what if she continues to do better and then reaches your standard?" But I think it's far too slow for my liking. So, like my mom has potential, I think, to change in ways that benefit her. I don't know. I guess my ramble doesn't make sense. I guess I answered it for myself, but just I don't know. I've seen some change in my mother, but
Okay,
not
hang on.
drastic.
So trying is fine.
Mhm.
So are your parents overweight?
Um, not really. Like I mean, they're just like old people.
Yeah,
They're not
just a
like super
little
overweight.
tum tum with the aging. Okay,
Yeah.
all right. Have you ever known people who've tried to lose maybe more than 30 pounds?
Yes. When I was young, my mom was trying to lose weight, and it was like an ongoing thing.
Right. Okay. So when people try to lose weight, they say, I'm overweight
Yes.
and I'm going to try and lose weight, and they'll read some books or watch some videos or something like that, right? So that they can figure out how they can lose weight, right?
Yeah.
And then they strive to lose weight and they eat less and they exercise or whatever they're going to do, right? So,
Mhm.
but the first thing you have to do is say, I'm overweight, I need to lose weight, right?
Yeah.
Now, has your mother said, I have bad emotional habits, I need to improve?
No.
Oh, well, then what are you talking about? She's trying. She hasn't
Yeah.
even admitted
Yeah.
fault.
That's true. That's very true.
Oh no, I've created this magical machinery or this hamster wheel in your mother's brain called trying. It's like, okay, but trying means that you have some goal. I'm trying to pass the bar exam. So I'm studying law or something like that. I'm studying the requirements for the bar exam or something like that, right? So
Yeah.
your sister is a sentimental manipulator, in my humble opinion, who says,
Well,
no, she's never admitted fault, but she sure is trying to get better. She's trying. Why don't you have sympathy for the fact that she's trying? And it's like, listen, girl hasn't even admitted she's fat, and you say she's trying to lose weight?
yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense. Seems very backwards.
It really doesn't.
Yeah.
And hey, I'm a big fan for striving. I'm a big fan for striving. I strive, and I have huge respect for other people who strive. But in order to strive, you have to say that there's a goal I wish to attain that I'm deficient in, which is losing weight or gaining muscle or more exercise or stretching or I don't know, whatever it's going to be, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to try and get to bed on time, blah, 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 right? And so, yeah, I mean, but for your sister to say, no, she's better, she's trying, it's like, well, if she's trying, then we should have an open conversation. And also people who keep their goals of improvement totally secret. Like if you want to lose weight, you have to tell everyone in your life so they don't offer you dessert, right?
Yeah.
So that they're with you on the journey. They help you out, right?
Yeah.
They give you a piece of fruit instead of a muffin, or I don't know, whatever would be happening, right? So you have to enroll people in general improvements. And your mother has not admitted any faults, and she's not enrolled people and said, listen, I have a bad habit of getting aggressive. Please, 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 if you notice me getting aggressive, I'm going to give you a safe word. Fire bong or something like that, right? And then I will
Yeah.
do my best to control my temper. I'll go for a walk or whatever, If I start to lose my temper, give me jazz hands, just shake your hands around and, but none of that is occurring as far as I can tell.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Me
so
too. I
that's
haven't
just a
seen
bunch of nonsense. Sorry. From your sister, not from you.
Right. No, you're right. And I hadn't said that to her. I just was like, oh well, I mean, okay, it's kind of a slow progression, but all right.
Right.
Yeah. It's pretty frustrating, but
Well, and of course,
can't
as you
change
know,
what it was.
relationships need at least 5-to-1, positive to negative.
Right, exactly.
And when was the last time you had a month of consistently positive interactions with your family of origin?
No, never.
Well, that's not great.
No.
And again,
Okay.
you just have to, one of the tough things about becoming a parent is you have to orient yourself from your past to your children's future. And you have to say, is this relationship positive or negative for my relationship with my child? That's all it comes down to.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I have people I've worked with over the years, and every single one of those people has been good friends with my daughter. And I don't have people in my life who aren't positive towards my daughter. Doesn't mean they got to be best buds or whatever, but I'm not going to have relationships with people in my life who don't seem to care about my daughter. Just not going to do it.
Well,
Even if it's, maybe it could be fun or positive for me, but nope. I mean, I remember this even when I was, when I did my second show with Joe Rogan out in his studios in California, Joe dropped me off where my car was, and my wife was standing there, and he said goodbye to me and wished me the best in my career, said he really admired and liked the conversation, didn't say anything to my wife, didn't even acknowledge her existence. And she's like, I don't like that guy. Turns out she was right. But anyway, so that's, and I should have listened more, but I was a little greedy. So, yeah. So, I mean, if people have a plan for improvement, fantastic. But again, 95% of people who lose weight don't keep it off and gain it back, usually more. So even if and that's something as simple as not eating and exercising, genuine spiritual growth, particularly when you're older, particularly when your mistakes are all in the rear view, it's functionally impossible.
yeah. Yeah, that's definitely something that my husband and I have spoken about, where it's just all of their, like, I could try to explain to them how they shouldn't hit their children, but their years of hitting their children are behind them. So what's the point now? And you don't care. And it's just, it just seems like an uphill battle, and I don't think I'm going to
No,
get
but you
anywhere.
can do
with it.
that. I'm sorry to interrupt. I mean, obviously, you can have any conversations you want, but
Right.
my point is just have the conversations consciously and critically, right? So if you're going to have a conversation with your parents saying, I don't like this, I don't like that, just be there and don't just say the stuff and leave and cross your fingers. Just be there and say, and be really alert to what they say. Are they defensive? Do they minimize? Do they gaslight? Do they counterattack? Do
Mhm.
they storm out? Or do they listen and say, this is really tough to hear, but, please tell me more? And are they emotional? Do you connect? Right? You can have all the conversations you want. Just don't have them mechanically. Don't just, well, I said this thing and I'll cross my fingers and then check in another 3 months and still be annoyed. Like, just be really conscious, aware, and alert of what's happening in the conversation and really feel how they're reacting, because your feelings and your gut will tell you whether they're capable of change in a way that philosophy can't.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
All right. Well, listen, we've had a good old jawbone, and I really do appreciate the chat. Is there anything else that you wanted to mention?
Not for me, but I mean, I don't know about my husband.
No, our baby's just he slept for a little bit of the call, and then we just been switching on and off, and
Right.
he wants to be cuddled and napped and all that good stuff.
Okay,
So,
but listen,
um,
obviously, go do baby stuff. How was the conversation for you guys?
well, I know it was kind of a flyby. We think about our lives and how much we got going on of it, and we could just give what we can give to you in 2.5 hours. But it really was of great value to us to um, kind of have a neutral person, somebody that we respect. To take a look at our situation. So yeah, we definitely got a lot of value out of it, and maybe we'll be able to talk again sometime.
Oh, I would very much look forward to that, and I wish you guys the very, very, very best for the rest of the day.
Thank you so much. I
All the
appreciate
best.
your time.
Lots of love. Bye bye.
Bye.